Well, ladies and gentlemen, hello again. Welcome to another Reflected Reality Simulations video. My name's Graham. We're back in X-Plane 10 flying the Freeware model of the Douglas DC9. This is part 4 of the video series. In parts 1 and 2 we looked at the full setup, takeoff, climb, all the way out to the cruise phase, and then in the second video the descent planning, the descent followed by an ILS arrival, taxiing and shutdown. In part 3 we looked at the missed approach, the go-around procedure, and taking the aircraft to the hold. We then entered the hold and flew manually around using the heading pointer. In this video today we're going to look at a non-precision arrival with the DC9. We're over the Adriatic at the moment, just over the eastern coast of Italy, and we're going to be landing at an airfield called Bari down here. We're going to be doing the VOR Zulu approach onto runway 07. Currently we're out here at EKMUR, distance 20 from the Bari VOR. There's Bari 116.4, 116.4. We've got it tuned on both radios. EKMUR is out here on the 322 radial, or 142 inbound. We've got 142 here and we're centralised on that track. So the aircraft is exactly overhead EKMUR and at flight level 90 or 9,000 feet here. We're going to fly ahead and we're going to make a right hand turn to enter a 14D arc around the Bari VOR. We're going to fly all the way around that arc, descending down to 2,000 feet, and as we cross this radial here, the 257 radial, we're going to turn in and then intercept the final approach track. The 257 radial, I have the reciprocal mark, the 077, and we'll tune that just by swapping the radio on the other side here. Once we turn inbound, we're going to fly down the VOR Zulu arrival. You can see it lists the final approach fix here at 3,000 feet. It also gives you distances and heights from 6D all the way down to 2D. To make it a little bit easier, I've also worked out the heights at 987 miles down. So basically I've got check heights for each of these points on the profile here. You notice also that the only vertical guidance we have is the check heights. It gives you the descent speed in feet per minute for an appropriate ground speed. So to make life easy and in line with the real life operating procedures for this kind of arrival, we'll fully configure the aircraft for landing before we start the final descent. That means the gear's going to be down, the spoiler's armed and the flaps at the landing config with the speed back around 140 to 142 knots. The threshold speed here is 133, so 143 would be perfect. That means I'm going to need about 800 feet a minute on the descent. We'll talk about that as we get a little bit closer. The aircraft is all set up. We've got the bug speed set. We've got the minima of 620 feet. There's 620 there, 620 for the VOR. And we've got the field elevation, or the threshold elevation, 176. We've got that bugged on the yellow bug here. So what I'll do is I'll take the pause off. Let me just change the chart back to the arrival. Just check the overhead panel because I have repositioned the aircraft, so I want to make sure it's all set correctly. Parking brakes off would be a good idea, and otherwise we should be good to go. Okay, so I'll take the pause off and we'll let the aircraft fly along. So I'm going to reduce the power about 2 miles before the turn, so about 18 miles, 18D, bring the power off and I'll come back to about 210. We'll try and fly the arc at 210 knots. I've got the heading bug set already to about a 90 degree turn to coincide with that DME arc. So there's the power coming off. We'll allow the aircraft to slow down. And at the same time I'll set the altitude alerter down to 3,000 feet. There's 3,000 feet. Going through 16 miles, I'll click heading select. And now we should be able to go down to 3,000 as well. So I'll put the aircraft into the vertical speed and descend around 1,000 feet per minute. I've got keystrokes bound to adjust this vertical speed wheel here, but it doesn't seem to capture the altitude properly if we do use that for capture. Just something to be aware of. So turning to keep the RMI pointer on the left hand side of the aircraft and we'll fly around the arc. I'll change the radio aids over so it's looking at the crossing radial, and I'll set the inbound, which is 067 on the primary. Excellent, so there we are, established on a 14D arc. The speed is coming back gradually, so that's fine. What I'm interested in is the distance around this arc that I have to go. I want to be about 4,000 feet, so 14 miles out, 12 miles out, 4,000 feet would work. I need to descend down to 4,000 feet, and there's a good rule of thumb we can use for that. It's the 070 I want to roll out on, which is here, and currently I'm over here. Every mark around the pointer, assuming the arc is greater than 12 miles or so, around the 12 to 15 mile mark, every mark around the pointer is 1 mile. So starting from 70 there, that would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 miles to go until we turn in. So with 10 miles to go, I need to be down at 4,000 feet. I'm just passing 7,000 feet. That gives me 3,000 feet to lose, and that would be 9 miles. So that tells me that the profile is looking good at the moment. Notice it's just slightly greater than 14 at the moment, so 14D. So I'll bring the nose in a little bit. If that RMI pointer is ahead of the 90-degree point, I'm closing on the beacon, and if it's behind, I'm getting further away from the beacon, in still wind conditions, obviously. So speed's coming back to 210. We'll adjust the thrust to keep it around about there. Just checking how we're getting on here. So there's 070, that's 2 miles, 4 miles, 6 miles, 8 miles. And I've only got 2,500 feet to lose. If you're interested in the maths behind that, well, it's simply just the circumference of a circle. If you imagine that, let's say 12 mile diameter, 12 mile radius would be 24 miles diameter, and 24 times 3.14 something gives you around about 75 miles circumference, and there's about 72 of these little indications around the RMI. So a mile for a mile for 5 degrees. Out a little bit, 15D while I'm talking, so I'll bring the nose further around. Not the most elegant DME arc in the world here. So because the pointer is behind, we've got further out, and I'll just keep the pointer ahead of the 90-degree position here. And that should keep the distance coming in a little bit. So I want to be at 4,000 feet. I can reduce the sink rate a little bit now. So 70's there, 2, 4 miles. 4 miles to lose 1,000 feet. That's easily enough. I'll start configuring just now. So I'll take the first stage of, the first configuration stage is the slats on this aircraft. You see we're about 14.5 miles now. We're pretty much done with this chart, so I'll open up this chart so that we've got that available to us. So we're just about to cross the radial. I'll reduce the sink rate a little bit, and I'll use that opportunity to slow down. So we've got the slats. I'll take flaps 5, and as we cross the radial, we can see we're more or less there already. I'll go back to the primary radio set. That's the inbound track now. So at this point I'm going to turn in distance to the station and altitude to lose. That's all that really matters. Let's set it up to intercept the final approach track. I'll turn it on the heading bug, and I'll set nav lock. I'll also start slowing down. So flaps 15. Still below the profile now. 4,000 feet. I would need 12 miles. I've got 14, so that's looking good. That's telling me there's 1,000 feet to go to the cleared level. So flaps 15. We're nearly there, so I'll put the gear down. Flaps 25, and let the aircraft continue to decelerate. We'll take flaps 40 in just a moment or so. Gears down, so I'll arm the spoilers, and we'll put the nose light on. Aircraft's about to capture, so I'll bring the course pointer around. That's it set for the missed approach. There we go, 12 miles, 2 miles to run to the final approach fix at 3,000. I've only got 500 feet to lose now. So I took flaps 40, which is the landing flap, and allowed the aircraft come back to about 140, 142. I want to be quite careful that if I level off in this config, I'll need a fair amount of power. But this isn't the sort of approach you would be slick with in any way, shape or form. Being conservative is all you need here. Remember, we're varying the sink rate to stay on the profile. If I'm varying the sink rate and changing the airspeeds all simultaneously, changing the config, that's far too many parameters simultaneously, so it's only the vertical speed I'm interested in. There's 3,000 feet and 10 miles, so that's more or less the final approach fix. I'm now looking for the speed, which is accurate, and the next check will be 9 miles 2640. That's what I've calculated based on the differences per mile. So 9 miles 2640, around about here. There you go, 9 miles 2640. The next check is 8 miles 2320. So 2320 is around about here. Checking the sink rate, maybe lower the nose just a little bit. Again, I'm doing that with my keystroke down here. I highly recommend you use that if you're going to do something like this. It just makes it a lot easier. You can keep the instruments in view. So 8 miles, 2320, 20 feet under profile, that's fine. And speed's almost exactly where it needs to be, just making very slight changes. Good datum power setting here is around 50 to 55% N1, depending on the weight and the configuration of the aircraft for the approach. 7 miles, I'm expecting 2,000 feet exactly, and there we are, 2,000 feet. The next checks are from the chart here, so 6 miles, 1675, 1675, round about here. Notice the terrain on the chart descends towards the airfield, so the readout says we're only 1,500 feet above the field, when in actual fact we're about 1,700 above the threshold. 6 miles, 1675, a little bit high now. I'll just increase the sink rate a little bit. Making sure as I increase the sink rate the speed doesn't increase, so a power reduction would be appropriate. The marker isn't on the chart, so it's obviously a slightly older data source in X-Plane. 5 miles, a 1360. 5 miles, a 1360. That's about 40 feet high, but the sink rate is slightly higher, so it should correct. Again, make sure the speed doesn't creep up. 4 miles, 1040. 4 miles, 1040. It's coming back on profile. I'll reduce the sink rate a little bit now. The next check is 3 miles, 720. That's only 100 above minimum, so I'll get rid of the charts. And the missed approach is straight ahead on the heading we've got bugged out to 3,000 feet.
500.
So visual with the field, I can see the pappies. Minimum's 100 above, autopilot's coming off, flight director's off,
400.
and we'll position onto the centre line. Watching the speed, watching the sink rate. You see Bari here has got an extensive displaced threshold. That can make the picture look a little bit unusual on the approach.
200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Reverse. We'll roll to the next exit. coming back to reverse idle and applying some brakes. And forward idle. Good to vacate here. What we'll do is we'll vacate the runway, come to a halt, set the parking brake, and we'll put the spoilers away. Let's have a look outside. I'll move a little bit further away so the noise disappears. And let's have a look at the chart. So what we did first and foremost, we flew around the EKMUR arrival here. We got to 16D from the Bari. We used the heading bug to turn right and then follow this 14D arc around. I did that by making sure the RMI pointer, which was pointing to the beacon at all times, was at 90 degrees to the aircraft's track. Because there's no wind, we could use that as the heading. Okay, so we came round, and because we're about just around about a 12-mile arc, to all intents and purposes, every 5 degrees round that arc is equivalent to 1 mile. So we used the pointing, the indicators on the RMI to count those miles off and make sure we flew a continuous descent. We knew that the arc, if we followed it all the way around, was taking us out to 14 miles, and I knew at 12 miles, which is where we'd intercept, I wanted to be 4,000 feet. That's what I was aiming for. We had the crossing radial tuned on the number 2 radio, just so we could see it. And as we're flying around, we retuned the inbound 067 for the final approach track. Once we established on the final approach track, we flew at 3,000 feet until we got to final approach fix. We actually flew a more continuous descent towards that, but we got to 10 miles and 3,000 feet. At that point, we're fully configured with the gear down and flaps 40. That's important. We wanted to keep the airspeed as consistent as possible because we're flying a profile based solely on the ground speed and the descent rate. This particular chart, this is the official state chart here. It only gives distances out to 6 miles and the 10-mile point. I looked at that, looked at the difference there, so between 2 and 3 miles, that's 320 feet. I basically added them all on, so basically 320 feet for every mile. And I scribbled those down on a bit of paper, just as we would do on the real aircraft should our charts be missing those distances. We used those check heights on the way down until we got to the minima. As it happened, we were visual about 100 feet above minima today. Because it's a VOR arrival, it's quite offset, and that's not at all unusual. If we look at the runway here, we can see over here is the VOR. So there was no way that that procedure was going to have us aligned on the VOR, because it's quite far. Let's see if I can align the camera over the runway. So the VOR is over here, and the runway is here. If we're landing on runway 25, the approach would actually be offset a little bit, so you'd come in basically in this direction here, so that when you got to the minimums you'd be able to turn onto the extended centerline. But on this approach it was never going to be that accurate. So we had to do a little bit of visual manoeuvring at minimums, and that's not at all unusual. We touched down with flaps 40, the speed brakes or spoilers activated automatically, and it seemed to have a little bit of a bounce on touchdown at Bari. I've done this video a couple of times, and I think the reason behind it is it is a sloping runway. It descends down towards the far end, and just as we touch down, just at the touchdown zone, there's a little bump there, so maybe that's what caused that. Otherwise, it was an entirely uneventful approach. The key things for doing non-precision is just to keep everything as stable and as slow as possible. So you've got the speed back, the gear down. So having looked at this video and done all the other videos, you can now do a full radio age departure, the cruise segment and the ILS approach We can do a missed approach if it doesn't go according to plan, and we can hold either from the missed approach or at an intermediate waypoint. We've got some procedure notes, so we know how much fuel to load, and we know we can do a non-precision arrival on the aircraft. I've not done an NDB approach in this aircraft just yet. I'll have a look at it, see whether or not it's possible, but even when these aircraft were brand new, the NDB approaches were not really that common for aircraft like this. You'll find that having the VHF radios up here, the VOR radios up here, is an indication as to what the aircraft would do. So in the next video we'll either have a look at maybe some visual approaches, or we'll maybe look at some flight planning for the DC9. Thanks very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. As always, any questions or comments about the video, I'm very happy to have a look at it. Thanks very much, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.